Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Autocar Business Changemakers podcast in association with Tomorrow's Journey. This is episode 10. I'm joined as ever by Chris Kirby, CEO of Tomorrow's Journey. And joining us for the last episode in the series is Conor Horne, who is Director of the UK for Lotus Cars. Thank you very much for coming in. How are you?
I'm very well. And Ireland, not to forget Ireland. Got to remember my roots. I'm very well. Thanks for hosting me today.
No problem at all. This feels like a bit of a moment, doesn't it, for the last episode, having an OEM come in to give the perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess especially with the exciting journey that Lotus is on and starting and I guess heading towards. Probably before we get into that though, Conor, you've been in the automotive industry for a while, so it'd be good for our listeners just to hear a little bit about your background and kind of some of your area of expertise before we dive into
sure.
it.
So I actually trained to be an accountant and very quickly realised that the last thing I wanted to be in life was an accountant. So I did a placement year whilst I was at university with a large volume manufacturer based out of Luton, naming no names, and what that did was really kind of like as an absolute the petrol head that I am, showing me that I wanted to get into the automotive industry, and since then never looked back. So worked for several large OEMs in the UK now, all at manufacturer level. Ranging from your volume brands to your premium brands, and now Lotus obviously working and leading within a large luxury brand. And I suppose within my career, I think probably the last 3-4 years have been the most varied in terms of and challenging to a degree as well, because I've moved away from the comfort zone that is the wholesale business model, and then led now in the direct to consumer and agency business model, which obviously doesn't come without its challenges. But yeah, that's been quite a change.
That's really interesting. I want to talk a little bit about Lotus's journey in a second if we can. But why is the wholesale model the comfort zone for you?
I think it's because it's what we've always known in the automotive industry. So it's right down to the retailer network that exists with all manufacturers. Everyone knows exactly what is required of them. They know their jobs and their roles and their responsibilities. So right down to a sales consultant at the coalface selling to a customer, they know exactly what they need to do. They know that there's the drama and the theatre of selling a car and going into the sales manager, coming back, that whole discounting journey, etc. And customers know it as well. They kind of expect to come in, and we know this through both quantitative and qualitative data, that they come into a retailer, into a dealership, knowing that there's a deal generally to be had. And right the way up to investor level, I think everyone knows that that's the kind of that's the way in which retailers operate, and manufacturers for time and time gone by have been quite comfortable with that, because obviously as soon as the car rolls off the production line, very shortly after you wholesale it to a retailer, and whilst that's not job done necessarily, there is obviously, you want to make sure that the funnel is fed with demand for your product, but financially the car has now left your balance sheet and now sits somewhere else. So that's kind of been the norm, I would say. That's why it's the comfort zone. And then agency now is really coming to life. For me, I think one of the biggest benefits of agency is to truly embrace online sales, which I know we'll come on to. You have to harmonise the price and be able to guarantee that online price is the same as what you would get offline. And we know, again, from all the research that we've done over the years, that there's also out there that's been conducted by other research parties, that the online price is always seen as the starting price to take offline and haggle to get that better deal. So with obviously growing online sales now across all retail industries, not just automotive, the automotive industry's lagged behind, and that's the reason for it. So to truly embrace it, we need to harmonise that price.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating. I think people are always surprised when you think about a move to online sales. You think, oh, it's just like moving any retail business from an offline to an online model. But all of that complexity that you like really succinctly described is what I often try and say to people. That wholesaling model, having people at the coalface selling who aren't employees of, because when somebody buys a car, they buy a car from the brand. So they just go, oh, well, I bought a car from Audi. You know, but you didn't. You bought a car from a franchise dealer, which is a completely different company. You're also, when you explain, and you financed it with a different company. That's You know, it's like, oh, it's really complicated. But in the customer's mind, it's just the single brand. So it seems easy to move it online, but actually super complicated. It's also a skill set thing. Someone said to me, and it was a real penny drop moment when they said, "Oh, OEMs don't have the skills to sell because they've been there to be like brand and wholesale companies."
I agree.
Yeah.
And
it's not a bad thing. It's a difference that the people that work there aren't designed to sell and retail. They're
100%.
designed to brand build and push through that model. So it's not an easy shift either, just to go, well, let's just get a nice online journey. And
you're 100% right, and I couldn't agree more. I think this is where it's important to have that retail experience under your belt as well, and certainly have that within your teams, so that you understand what the roles and those true responsibilities that the retailers did. Because in your ivory towers, it's very easy, as I said, in the wholesale business model, just to underestimate all the work that the retailer network do. And when you move to agency, a lot of those roles and responsibilities then shift to the manufacturer. So you need to be fully aware of what they are to be able to then take them on board and to take that role of a retailer ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's no small change.
Yeah, and there's bits that you can streamline in the process, because I think there is a lot of friction in buying a car through the wholesale retailer model, but there is a big chunk of that. There's some stuff you could strip out, as you said. There's a big chunk of it that has to move in responsibility, and it's a thing that is not always known to people at the OEM side. It's it goes to the dealer and they do some stuff and the car gets sold. It's slightly complex. So definitely an interesting one. But maybe we'll get back to that a bit later on as well. But do you want to start to touch on a little bit about Lotus? And really
This is really interesting to hear this, because we know a lot about Lotus's journey. I think a couple of years ago we had the big Vision 80 strategy presentation, electrification, moving away from being a maker of artisan sports cars to 150,000 cars a year, which are numbers people don't associate with the Lotus brand. They will come to, I'm sure. But it's that changing retail approach that I don't think has made the headlines, as it were. I don't think people are necessarily clicking for that. So how do you take a brand that's got such an intimate connection with its clients that maybe they know the name of everyone who bought an Elise last year, for example, to that scale, to such wildly different products? Yeah,
you're absolutely right, and I think I've never been exposed with any of the brands that I've worked with previously to the level of conquest that we're going to have to drive, and so new, fresh customers that have never bought or never sat in a Lotus in their life before. And I think for me, there's kind of like it's two steps here. I think we mustn't forget all the customers that we do know on a first name basis, and we have to bring them with us on their journey, because they've been very loyal to us, and we need to respect that. We need to, as I said, we need to bring them with us. But we do have a huge job to do if we're going to reach that 150,000 global sales figure. We can only do that through bringing new conquest business into the brand. So we need to, first of all, we need to make sure that we've got the right skill sets within the manufacturer ourselves. So by that I mean that we have lots of experience across not only automotive industry, but if I just look at the automotive industry, best practices that exist with all those other large OEMs. Hence why I'm now leading the UK, because I have that wealth of experience in my back pocket. And if I look at my management team, it's exactly the same. Just there last night, I was creating a slide of all the brands that everyone's worked for, and that we've got 10 plus brands within that of experience within just my management team, and that filters right the way through. So bringing all of that with us is to kind of, okay, well, how do our competitors achieve their annual sales volumes? What are their business plans? How do they get there? That's something that we now need to kind of implement now very quickly into the brand. And we can only do that with the experience, as I say, that's coming through. And you look at our vice president, Mike Johnson. He's another example of that. His wealth of experience coming from several different very large global automotive brands. That sets us up nicely. So, and then we have to think very differently as to how we do it, because it's not just good enough to replicate what our competitors do. Yes, we have an incredible product, and we need to fully kind of utilise some of the first mover advantage that we have with the first hyper SUV, full electric vehicle within the electrics. So use that to our full advantage. But also we need to disrupt, and we need to look at things slightly differently. We can use the fact that we are a smaller business. We can look at the fact that we are a 0.1% market share brand at the moment, and we don't have 30 different levels of approval to go through to make something happen. We can react quite quickly, and we can set up our business accordingly with that kind of think fast mentality. So that's what we're doing. You look at the business model we've chosen to operate within the UK with agency, on our network of retailers, how we sell, where we sell. We've got a state-of-the-art flagship showroom in the heart of central London on Piccadilly, opposite the Ritz. I mean, we're doing things slightly differently as to the norm, because we can and we need to, as I said, replicate, but also do things slightly differently and to truly disrupt, to drive all that conquest business to the brand.
What strikes me compared to some of the other guests we've had on this programme, they sort of operate behind the scenes in a way, and it's the end user that benefits, but they don't necessarily know everything that goes on leading up to that. But you seem to have a much more customer-facing role, in the sense that, you know, all eyes are on you in a way. All eyes are on what Lotus is, what's changing at Lotus.
Yeah.
Do you feel you must feel the pressure?
It's funny, because I can honestly say, and the last time I spoke to a customer on the phone was when I was on the shop floor at the coalface, some almost 2 decades ago, and I've spoken to 20, 30 probably plus customers in the short period of time that I've been with the brand. So in terms of being right, kind of, you say, kind of like speaking directly and being very customer centric and very much kind of like with the customer in this journey. Already I've kind of seen that firsthand, and we need to, because as I said, customers who are spending north of £100,000 on a car expect the very best experience. And right now we obviously are, we will have teething issues, as you would expect, going through the growth journey that the brand is on. So we need to ensure that we work with our customers through that process. Have we got it right currently? No, absolutely not. Has any manufacturer, especially operating in the agency framework, got it completely, absolutely right? No. So we need to, as I said, use that kind of that nimble approach that we can do so, from being smaller to our full advantage, to work with our customers to grow the brand successfully.
And do you think, I was kind of alluding to a bit of the question I was thinking about as you were kind of going through and explaining the journey, really is about the advantage that you have, where we talked at the start about, you know, the changing skill sets in organisations, because you're smaller but have your big kind of growth ambition. Does that starting position maybe give you an advantage over some of the competitors? As in, if you're selling a couple of 100,000 vehicles today through a massive retailer network and you want to move to agency, it's tricky.
Yeah.
If you're going from small to big and you want to make that change, does it present big opportunities? Is it a bit of a balance of both? Kind of, how do you see that?
It's a great question. I think if you'd have given me the role to lead a business that already was doing 150,000 cars globally, I would say that's an easier gig.
Right.
This is definitely growing from the start up is definitely harder. Doesn't mean, as I said, that we can be quite creative in how we're going to get there. Absolutely. So when we talk about operating a new business model, obviously in my previous role, I was responsible for transforming a very large premium OEM to agency in the UK. And that was a huge job, because you had that legacy there already. So to your point, it was much harder to transition to a new business model. So yes, it's it's much easier to build that foundation up when you don't have that legacy there, or it's not as prominent. But does it make the task to grow to 150,000 cars any easier? No, it definitely doesn't.
No. Yeah, it's probably a bit of a 50-50, or probably not in that proportions, but there's lots of advantages, but also you've got all of the challenges of scaling. If you've got a strong retailer network behind you who's been used to, you know, selling that number of vehicles, then that is as an advantage, I guess, on the other side. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that starting point for me, I think probably one of the things that requires the majority of our attention currently is our system infrastructure. And I think that obviously you take that for granted when you work at any established brand, not even automotive, any established brand, that you walk in and you have those processes, you have those systems already there, so you just kind of you can obviously improve them, but they're there already and they exist already to improve and to tweak. Whereas when you're coming from quite literally the point that we are to our growth ambitions, you are largely kind of almost operating with a startup mentality, a blank sheet of paper, and that for me is probably the biggest learning curve since I've joined, in that you do truly take those processes and systems for granted that just aren't there, and you need to build them up from scratch. So.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'm also interested in the product. So I think we talked a bit, maybe we'll come back to business models, but tell us a bit more about kind of the product roadmap, or at least the bits that you can tell us about. Because I think you were saying you're the first brand to be fully electric within...
Yeah, by 2028. So we are truly committed as a brand to the full transition to EV. So by 2028, we'll only offer an EV product lineup. In recent years, we've seen ourselves for the first time in a 75-year history of the brand move away from producing just an outright sports car. The Emira is the last hurrah of the kind of traditional combustion engine sports cars. What a great last hurrah that is. And now we move into some of the more mainstream channels that you would expect your large OEMs to be in, and ultimately that's the only way in which you're gonna generate the level of sales volume that we need to get to that 150,000. So Electra was the first product that saw us move away from that traditional sports car only product portfolio. So it's a hyper SUV, a phenomenal car. I mean,
it looks amazing.
It looks amazing. The stats alone. There's for me, what I think I'm most intrigued with that car is that there's so many different reasons as to why you would want to buy it. So it doesn't have kind of necessarily, for the first time in my career, and even as a petrol head, I'm looking at a car that generally it's quite obvious why you buy a car. If I look at the cars I've owned in the past, it's very obvious why you buy, say, a small SUV diesel, because you need something that's frugal and cost effective to carry around your family. And I look at the Electra, and you look at 905 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds on one hand, and you've got a very strong 370 plus mile range on the other, and then you've got this SUV on the other, and then you've got the technology in the car is just on a different level to anything I've ever been exposed of but before. So you've kind of got these this plethora of reasons as to why you'd want to buy, which obviously makes your marketing quite challenging, because you're trying to pinpoint.
Those are different things for different people.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And to be very transparent, that's exactly what we do. So we have a campaign over here for customers that are looking at having the bragging rights of having quite literally the fastest SUV on the market. You've got then here is someone that a marketing campaign for somebody who's looking for an EV that has a strong range that can relieve some of that range anxiety that we know still exists within that buying group. SUV for customers who are looking for a family car. So yeah, it's there's lots of different reasons, which is great. And then we move then to Amaya, which comes out, has been officially launched earlier on in September in New York. A phenomenal car, much bigger in the flesh as well. That was the thing that kind of stood out for me, that when I saw it I thought, wow, it is much larger. You can tell it's a Grand Tourer, which obviously when you're looking at photos of cars is much harder to kind of visualise. But
especially with EVs, because the proportion, they don't have the same kind of must have an engine and a gearbox and a thing. The proportions can be a bit funny.
Absolutely, but a phenomenal looking car. And for me, the rear end of that car is one of the best looking cars I've ever come across. And I'm saying that, you won't believe me, but I'm saying that with my Lotus hat.
Take the badge off for a second.
I'm taking that genuinely. It is a phenomenal looking car. And then we move to I say by 2028, some of these products will come sooner than that.
Yeah.
But a small SUV and also then a full electric sports car as well.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
so the product portfolio will grow quite quickly and into some of the fastest growing segments within the market to then facilitate that growth ambition.
So the products are, I mean, the electric sports car will probably be the most familiar proposition to any traditional Lotus buyer, but the products are generally extremely different from anything else you've sold in your 75-year history.
Yeah.
How has the customer journey changed? If I was a Lotus customer today, how have the steps changed to, buying an Exige back in 2006 sort of thing?
Yeah, well, you probably knew your sales consultant or your whoever was selling you cars on a first name basis, and you'd bought off them for a million years. And not only just the buying process, but also then from an after sales perspective, I was honestly just shocked by our part sales and the lack of servicing. Mm-hmm. And actually the majority of our traditional customer base love to get the parts themselves, buy the parts and then do it themselves. So I think it's not just even the buying process, it's the whole customer journey of owning a Lotus. And obviously that moves away because I would now be a target consumer of the Lotus brand.
You can't do a 120 kilowatt battery in the driveway.
So it's exactly, but it's and I wouldn't have the first clue as to what is.
Got on your rubber wellies.
Yeah.
Gonna have a go.
Don't come at me with that. So I think it's not just even the buying journey, but now the customers that we're looking to attract. We have to look at the wider kind of UK consumer target audiences, and for me what's ringing in my head are all those different groups that I know that you've got kind of like the 14% of consumers that now only want to buy online and they don't want to touch anyone. They couldn't think of anything worse than speaking to a human being. And then you've got on the other end the 10% of consumers that probably are closer to our traditional Lotus consumer base that couldn't think of anything worse than going online to buy a car, and certainly even just the buying journey. Like, don't even want to watch a YouTube video. They only want to buy from Greg at West London because Greg has sold them their 10 cars and I trust Greg's opinion more than anything. And then where you see that the majority of consumers sit in the UK now, the 86% of consumers sit in that middle, where like probably us and like most customers or most people listening to this podcast would see themselves that actually I'll do a bit of both. I like to research online, I like to watch the YouTube videos, I like to read the reviews of a new product. But I still want to test drive. I still want that physical touch point at some point in the journey before I commit. And that's still very important because, as I said, 86% of customers still want that physical touch point. But then also kind of when they then go back online, they might not want to transact in the store, so they've seen it now, go home and then buy online. So I've definitely just realised I've got my maths wrong there. 76 sit between that middle, obviously.
No one checks your percentages on this podcast.
Sorry, 14% on one side, 10% on the other, 76% in the middle. But obviously 76% grows to 86% when you include the 10% that still want that offline only experience. So 86% of consumers still want that physical touch point.
This is your inner accountant coming back out.
Yeah, this is.
76% of all stats are 100% correct.
Well,
exactly.
So it's certainly fine.
My motto.
So for me, it's really important that, and this is where I talk about agency and really you need to be a direct-to-consumer brand to truly unlock the benefits that exist to capitalise on online sales. But it's not just about targeting that 14% of consumers that want to buy online and online only. It's about empowering all consumers, no matter what your preference is, that if you want to do a test drive and a product demonstration in store, but that's the only part of the journey you want to do as a physical touch point, and actually you want to sit at home with your wife or your husband with a glass of wine and then go through the buying journey and configure your car and place that order in your own time without the pressure of being in a sales in a sales environment, you can still do that and not be penalised because the price is the same as if you'd have transacted in store. That for me is the most important aspect of the agency business model. So
yeah, absolutely. I think the percentages around the kind of online sales stuff I find really fascinating how it's progressing, because I think they get presented in different ways depending on kind of where you sit in that process. The dealers will say people want to buy in store and vice versa. And you can definitely see it transitioning over time. The thing you were saying about having a kind of in-store test drive experience, I still feel like people want to touch and feel the car. They don't necessarily want a full sales demonstration, because sometimes that can feel pressured or structured. I also think there's a bit where when people just never bought a car online. So I still remember, like, really sticks in my mind. One of my friends was buying a used car, but he said about Kazoo. He said, "Chris, have you heard about Kazoo?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard about Kazoo." He said, "Well, they said I could buy this car online." And then the guy's same-ish age as me. I was like, "Yeah, you can do that." He goes, "Well, I don't know. How does that work? Just deliver it to my house, and then if I don't want it, I give it back." Like, yeah, it's fine. He's like, "Oh, right, okay." And I think when people have had like that one-time experience of it, everyone's just like, "Oh, right, cool. This is fine." So there's a bit where I think quite a large percentage of that kind of middle chunk is still there, just going, "Well, I don't want to do it because it's not how I've done it before." So I think there's a bit of a transition in, like, the next buying cycle could change
and
quite drastically.
It's not just automotive, although we saw the exact same. I'm just a conveyor belt of stats, by the way, just as a pre-warning here. And we see that through now. 76% of UK consumers have a preference to do the majority of their car buying journey online. So I think where we traditionally have had a preference to do something offline, I'm talking outside of automotive here. You look at the national statistics for retail sales, we've gone from 19% prior to COVID to 27% post-pandemic, where now consumers have seen that actually, like for me personally, there was two things that I would only ever buy offline prior to the pandemic, which was clothes, because I always wanted to try them on. I just anyone who says that it's easy to return clothes is lying to you. It's not. It's not. They end up just sitting in my wardrobe waiting for the next person, the next like birthday or Christmas that I can give my hand-me-downs to, because I can't be bothered to return
Definitely
them.
resonates with me.
And then the other was grocery shopping. Like, I couldn't think of anything worse than someone being the person responsible to pick my apples and my bananas, because I know that they're going to choose that one that no one wants, and my bananas are going to arrive brown. And the reality is that I was forced to do both of those throughout the pandemic online, and post-pandemic I look now and I see that actually no, my fruit and groceries when they got delivered to me were too fresh than if I'd have picked them myself from the local supermarket. So that's something now that I look at and think, well, I'm time poor, so I'll continue doing that. So continue buying online for my groceries, but I've gone straight back to buying in store for clothes, because again, it wasn't for me. And I think consumers have done that. We saw that over the pandemic, online sales for all industries and automotive included increased significantly, and then some people have, it's actually, wow, that was as to your point, Chris, it's like, that wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, I'm going to do that again. And then others were, oh no, I didn't like that. My mum was in the same category as that. She needed to buy a car. I gave her the details to buy a car online. She did it all. She was so uncomfortable. I had to handhold her the way through it. And she was like, that was unbelievable.
Never have to go to a dealer again. They'd have to go out. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interesting. It's like the commodification of the car in a way. People are realising that a car is a product that slots into your life, and you can choose your attributes that you want. But ultimately, you wouldn't necessarily feel obligated to go and test out a phone before buying it if you knew that it did everything you needed it to do. And there's plenty of reviews out there, as you say. So maybe people are just getting more comfortable with the idea that that they can trust the product if they're exposed to the brand already, maybe.
Definitely. I think the one exception to that is when it still comes down to EV product, that we still have, whilst there are a lot of consumers in the market now that have owned or are currently owning an EV, so the next purchase will be less daunting, but there is still that kind of, it is a big leap to leave behind what you've known for so long and your true comfort zone of driving an internal combustion car to those kind of anxiety around range or kind of will it. I mean, I one of the brands I worked for back in 2011 was the very first brand or one of, I can't remember now, were they the first or were they one of the first to launch an EV product. And I remember that those first early adopters of EV, the questions we were getting through, can I drive through a puddle in this car or will it fry me? And it's fascinating now to see where we've moved.
We still get them on Twitter, don't worry.
To see where we've moved from to now actually, now the questions are still there, but they're different. And I think that's still kind of what we need to, I think customers still want to, or consumers still want to touch and feel an EV product before they.
I think the EV things are also interesting. So we've talked about it a bit on the podcast so far. We had Hyundai on talking about some test drive stuff actually that we work with them on, because their primary motivation for that was saying they wanted to give customers the opportunity to experience EVs for longer, because actually a lot of EVs do drive differently. I've had a couple now, but essentially an EV is kind of an EV. There isn't a engine noise or other emotive things that you'd get with cars, but the thing that you do, particularly if you're transitioning to EV, the thing you need to understand is like, can I live with it? And you can't get that in a 1 hour test drive driving it around the industrial estate and back. So this is more like experiential type opportunities, which I think is going to be interesting. And I don't know if that's something that's part of your plans at Lotus, or wanting to get people into vehicles kind of for longer as part of those experiences, or is kind of EV transition not really feeling like your responsibility? You want to get the product to people that are comfortable, that they want to make the change.
It's both. It's both. And we go back to those growth ambitions, that the only way we can truly grow is through driving that conquest business. And there will be different, just like talk about different kind of preferences in their buying preferences of online, offline. You've got exactly that, the same kind of level of confidence in transitioning to an EV. And we need to ensure we support all consumers that are looking at a Lotus, whether or not you're on your fifth EV or this is the first EV that you're going to own, that we provide that confidence around our product. I think one thing that goes against us when we talk about those, that kind of, would it be easier if we didn't have that foundation already there, is that we know that loyalty is stronger with EV consumers. That they tend to trust the brand that they currently own. And that's something now apart from a small pool of traditional Lotus consumers who trust the brand, it's great there, but given that the majority of our volume needs to come from conquest business, then we've got a job to do to ensure that we're not only providing the confidence in the product, but also in the brand as well. So, and
that's where direct to consumer comes in, I guess, again, because you can have those conversations before the buying process starts. Someone could come into Mayfair and talk about how their usage pattern works for an EV, and they can get that confidence and go away and look at the website.
Definitely.
Sort of in reverse almost.
Definitely. And I still think that it's proven that I think most consumers still think that they do more miles than they actually do. And we know that the average weekly mileage consumption, if it's called that, is 142 miles. And I would say for me, no, I couldn't possibly have an EV. I do like 50,000 miles a year in some years, but then I actually look at my commutes, and there's a good few chunky trips to Europe or to back home to Ireland or whatever that accounts for that. And actually I look at even anecdotally this week alone, I've been bouncing in and out of London. So a 370 mile range EV would be plenty sufficient to go from Surrey into London. So.
Yeah, definitely. I find it with mine. I've got a Polestar 2. It's kind of real world 250, 270 mile range. I find that sometimes I don't charge it for 2 weeks. If I'm just going to the station and back and going to the office and back, fine. And then other weeks, you do longer journeys. And that is a big learning. But that's the thing you have to live with. You can't tell people that. So all the conversations I have with my friend, couldn't possibly have an EV. One time a year I have to do this long drive. Okay, right, but think about this. No, couldn't possibly. And then it's the being in it for a week or a month that someone goes, actually, this is kind of.
Well, I'm the same as you. I've got an electric car at the moment that I've had for a couple of weeks. I'm spending a few months in it, and it's got a real world range of, let's say, 240, 250. And someone said to me the other day, well, how are you surviving? You live in a flat in London, you've got no charger, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, there's chargers at the office. There's a lamppost round the corner I can use if I really need to. But to be honest, I do 100 miles a week. And like Chris, I might go 2 weeks. And people have this preconception in their head and they get all invested in this mindset. But it doesn't really apply to them. It doesn't apply to them.
And when you actually are driving an EV, that you then realise how available Even the charging infrastructure is outside of your home or your place of work. And actually, if you just look in most petrol stations now, there's a bolt-on bank of EV chargers, and you only have to go to any services now. You see, I remember, as I said, back when I was very first on that journey of launching EVs over a decade ago, and you were squabbling for that one EV charger at the M40 Oxford services, and you were waiting there for an hour for that person to leave, and there was an orderly queue, and then you get onto it, and look, there's still not enough. That's the harsh reality. The infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, does need to improve, for sure. But for the majority of consumers that are doing that average 140 miles a week, when you've got a product, as I said, that has a real life average range of still north of 300 miles, it's more than sufficient.
And quick charging as well, isn't it? The 800 volt.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Before we sort of start wrapping up and bringing to a close, just while you're talking about living with electric cars, we, over the past 9 episodes, have been talking a lot about different ownership models, different ways of having a car, basically usership, subscription, sharing. How does that come into the Lotus roadmap? Are you sort of catering, thinking about these different types of ways that people want to have a car in their driveway?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you only have to look at my previous experience to see that I was responsible for launching a subscription service in the UK for a large Swedish manufacturer, and that was a massive success, a huge success. And now it remains a cornerstone of a profit and volume driver for that business in the UK and across several markets in Europe. For ourselves, for Lotus, we did also see quite a bit of abuse from said scheme at said manufacturer that I came from. And by abuse, I mean consumers that are then not taking it because it's the ability to if my financial circumstances change, or because I like changing my cars often and I want a new car every 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, so I like that flexibility. But by abuse, I mean that it's cheaper to take that car than it is to and buy that car on a subscription. Us then register the car, give it to a customer as a brand new car, and then just to use it for their monthly trip or their 2-week holiday to Cornwall, because it's relatively cost effective versus renting that car from a major daily rental company. So I think that's something that is at the forefront of my mind when we start talking about 900 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.9 second products. That actually, wouldn't that make a lovely wedding car and a lovely car for the weekend? And you look at the daily cost to rent a supercar in London, you're looking at 4 figures, and you look at the price to buy one of our cars and say contract hire, it's broadly in line with. So then all of a sudden, we what's worrying me about doing and rolling out tomorrow here is that we would see that abuse as well. And you don't want to put restrictions on that subscription service, because then all of a sudden you then it kind of undoes all the greatness that you buy a subscription for that flexibility, for that consumer group who are just looking at it genuinely because they like flexibility of changing their car 18 months, 2 years or whatever. So I'm not saying it's out of the question. I would say it's certainly out of the question in doing it for new cars for us. But because you lose the VAT and the depreciation on day one, but certainly for used cars, it's something that we'll probably explore at some point in the future. But we just need to be very careful how we manage that. And then we look at all the other finance products in the UK, and we absolutely need a strong offering there. I think 70% of EVs now in the UK are sold on contract hire, and the majority of those are business contract hire because of some of the tax benefits that you get with buying an EV. So having a strong contract hire offering and a strong business contract hire offering is absolutely paramount for us to.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a bit of a blur. We've talked about it a lot with a number of guests about the kind of blurring lines between. We're quite heavily involved in that subscription space, and but also looking at leasing. There's a blurring line between them. You
Definitely.
can give flexibility in a lease type product in the same way as you can have a subscription product, which is essentially a longer term rental situation. So, and those all apply when we talk about it loads about the different things to different people, different user groups for different OEMs or different brands kind of fits different models, and definitely having a kind of 30-day rolling on a 100,000 plus vehicle, it just probably doesn't work. But in some kind of maybe a flexible leasing type product where customers aren't necessarily committing for 24 plus months could fit nicely. The thing for us that we found a lot is it's helpful for the EV transition. Again, particularly when you've got that, is because you get people that will just go, and I take my personal journey with it. I went into our Ioniq 5 temporarily. I was waiting for my Polestar. I didn't go and see either of those in a showroom because I've got it on subscription. So I know that if I don't get on with it when I get it, maybe I have to keep it for a few months and then I can switch it out. You kind of don't have that commitment, whereas you commit in for 2 years, 3 years, you've got to go, can I get the dog in this? Can I get the kid? And what if in the next time I have another kid? And you have to make these assessments. So
that was one of the real huge levers for us at the previous brand that I worked for when we had that subscription offering, because what it allowed, exactly as you say, the transition to full electric is daunting for some, and actually if you know that if you don't get along with the car you can hand it back, that's a huge plus point. And we saw that the mix of BEV was much higher than the mix of ICE for that exact reason. One thing that I think as well when we talk about online sales is that if you know that you can quite freely hand the car back if you did drive it and you thought, wow, this is not for me, that gives you then the confidence to click buy without having test driven the car. Whereas if you're committing to it for 4 years, it's a much bigger commitment. One thing I think though that we're talking about here, the duration of the contract as one of the big selling points in the subscription, but there is another as well, which was this all-inclusive nature or the ability to be able to bundle products, and I think that's still very much something that I'd want to pursue quite quickly with our product portfolio, that where we're selling these very expensive cars to consumers that are probably like me, very time poor. The thought of then having to get my car serviced and have to take it to a retailer and all of that, I think that's something that is a bit of a headache that you just don't need when you are time poor, and that's something that we're looking at doing as well, is making sure that especially for female consumer groups, that's what we saw with our research, is that female consumer groups are definitely more interested in having an all-inclusive product. So I think to have something where we could bundle more is something that's very high on our agenda.
And charging as well, could that be part of
Yeah, for sure. It's a difficult one. Charging is something that is one of the learnings I have from my experience, that there's a huge perception, rightly or wrongly, from consumers in the UK especially, that doesn't exist quite so much in other markets, but certainly in the UK, that when you buy an electric car, that it's also the manufacturer that you're buying that car from's responsibility to support you with the charging of that car, whether it be home charging, whether it be charging when you're out and about. And it's like a perception that if you just put that mindset into buying an ICE car, it'd be like buying a 3.5 litre V6 Emira and then coming to us to say, can you please make sure that you give me a fuel card, and I want to make sure that you've clearly identified the locality of the nearest fuel stations to me, and that's something that I think that's when we talk about that mindset shift now, and us having to work with those consumers, just that mindset. It's not a wrong thing. It's, as I said, it's just something that we need to work with. So having a charging card, or certainly a strong home charging wall box offer, etc., and supporting customers with that is something that's is our responsibility, because consumers are asking for it. And that for me is really, if I look at all the roles I've had, I think it's we will move and react to what consumers' preference is in buying, whether that be online, whether that be EV, whether that be buying with a home charger, whatever it is, we need just to facilitate that and support that. That's the key to our success to grow, is listening to our consumers.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah, that
I
was,
think we could as always, we could probably carry on for another 4 or 5 minutes.
That's always the way. isn't
And
it?
genuinely in one take as well.
Yeah,
Nice.
really good. Conor, thank you very much for coming in and joining us for the last episode in the series, which is a landmark moment. We've made it all the way through without expiring in the stifling podcast studio. But thank you very much for coming down and giving us a bit of insight into Lotus's future. Thank you, Chris, for coming all the way in again.
Yeah, great.
And thank you very much for watching and listening. We'll see you again soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Goodbye.